And now Iran and Russia have reiterated that they need to continue their cooperation in the fight against terrorism and work out a lasting political solution to the Syria crisis. In a phone call, the Iranian President Hassan Rouhani and his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin discussed the latest developments in Syria, and among topics discussed was the liberation of the flashpoint city of Aleppo from terrorists. They also said Tehran and Moscow should work closer together to help resume negotiations aimed at finding a political solution to problems Syria is facing. The two presidents underlined that all Syrian groups should attend the talks in a bid to resolve the conflict in Syria. And joining us out of Brisbane is Mr. Max Igan, radio host and political commentator. Thanks for joining us on the program, Mr. Igan. Sir, your thoughts, please. What we're hearing, this growing chorus now to hammer out a peace accord and put an end to this awful conflict plaguing Syria.
Look, it would be really good if this would happen, but getting all groups to attend is going to be the problem. And also the problem is what these groups are and where they're coming from, who's funding them. I mean, it's all very well to have groups with some sort of political ideology attend, but when you have groups such as many of these terrorist forces who are in fact a mercenary army, they're simply going to go where the money leads them. They're just going to do what they're paid to do. That is the unfortunate reality of what's happening in Syria. See, people need to understand, as I've said so many times, what's going on in Syria is not a civil war, it is not a popular uprising, it is a covert invasion using a terrorist force, which is essentially a mercenary force. So even though you've got groups there that are claiming to represent some sort of sectarian belief or whatever, you've still got this underlying group of mercenaries who are simply going to blow things up if that's what they're paid to do. That's the unfortunate reality. You know, that the thing is that there are elements within the United States that are funding this and working there, sort of that are rogue to the government. I think the United States government realizes it's really got its back to the wall in Syria, but it's in a very difficult position where if it exposes the underlying corruption, then it's going to be in a state of massive embarrassment. But that is the unfortunate reality, is that we're dealing with a mercenary force and money speaks. That is the problem.
So then when we have these kind of mercenary forces there on the ground, how do you work out a political solution? Is even such a thing possible at this point?
Well, that's the thing, you know, really it isn't. I mean, it's just theatre and rhetoric, really. What needs to happen is that the United States government needs to admit that there are rogue elements within their government that have been funding this conflict right from the beginning. And going back to Hillary Clinton and what we've seen with her emails, which was not a Russian hack, and was absolutely major stuff in these emails, which is showing huge financial connections, huge dots being connected, and where a lot of this is really coming from. It's about taking resources from countries. It's about all sorts of things that we're not seeing that are very much below the surface. So I don't think much will come out of this, because you're going to continue to have this underlying force which is funneling money and weapons in there with one clear goal, which is to bring about regime change and to get what they want in Syria.
Okay, well,
and also the danger, also just to say another thing, the danger is that this could turn into a global conflict. If the United States is not prepared to address this corruption within its own government and rout these criminals out and wants to save face, it could end up in a major conflict between the East and the West, and we don't want this.
But yet, short of a diplomatic resolution, I mean, the alternative is pretty daunting and scary. You're talking about fighting this thing out until every last mercenary is killed, and it could take years for this to take place, right?
It could. That's why we've got to address the criminality which is funding these mercenaries. We've really got to look at where this conflict is coming from and what's really going on the ground. If you go there, I mean, some of the reports have been coming out by reporters. There's pipelines being built through here. There's all sorts of things going on that we're not being told. There's vast amounts of human trafficking that is going on, and this is what needs to be addressed. There are rogue factions that are funding this that don't even need to be in the United States government, because there's been certain things that have been set up to where this can be done. You don't even have to be in government to make this happen now. So the United States government needs to look at this and address this criminality that is infiltrated into its ranks, and just say, hey, look, we're sorry, and try to make this conflict right and try to make the situation right. But it's not going to be addressed through any type of military confrontation, through any type of flexing of muscles. I don't think it's ever going to be addressed diplomatically or politically. It has to be addressed by removing the funding from these terrorists and these mercenaries.
Thank you, Mr. Max Igan, radio host and political commentator, joining us out of Brisbane.